Welcome back, Soapsters, and in today's video we're looking at a spin swirl. Now we're going to do something a little bit different today, and we're going to do the heat transfer method. And what this essentially is using your exceptionally hot lye to melt the solid oils in your recipe and allow that heat transfer from the lye into the hard oils, melt them right down, and then add your soft oils or your liquid oils into that mixture. The advantage of this is you do not have to make your lye and allow it to cool. You can actually make your lye, as I am doing here, immediately, because you want the maximum amount of temperature you can possibly get into your hard oils to melt them down. So you'll notice here that I am pouring my lye into my little jug here. And it's really important that you kind of make sure this is fully dissolved. There is no lye left in your solution, and that you stir it until it is clear. As long as your lye solution is clear and you scrape the spoon along the bottom, you don't get any kind of gravelly sounds, or you can't feel any of these little pearls of lye, you are good to go. But it's important to kind of do that initially and make sure that it's completely dissolved and clear before you then add it into your hard oils. Now in there I've got a little bit of cocoa butter, I've got some lard, I've got some responsibly sourced palm oil, I've got coconut oil in there, and I think that's it for the hard oils. It is indeed. And then in my soft oils I've got some grapeseed oil, and I'm actually using quite a high proportion of grapeseed oil. I've got some olive oil, and I've got a little bit of sunflower oil in there. No, apologies, not sunflower oil, it's rapeseed oil. So I've got those three in there as well. So this is quite a high proportion of hard oils, and this technique requires a little bit of work time for you to get it right. And if you are doing this yourself and you're not sure about using something with quite so many hard oils, I would suggest you go and start with a 50-50 mix of hard oils and soft oils. Get used to the technique and understanding what your batter is going to do, and then see whether you need to add more soft oils and a bit of sodium lactate or salt to harden everything up, or whether you've got enough work time and you can sneak in a few more hard oils and make a harder bar at the end of it. Okay, so that's what I'm kind of doing here. I'm just getting everything done, and you can see now that I've got a nice clear solution there, and that will be absolutely fine to pour into our hard oils here and get those really melted down. So whilst we just kind of get everything sorted here, and let's take a look at the temperature. So you'll see I'm at about 89 degrees Celsius or centigrade for the lye, and I'm going to then use that to melt these oils down. So this soap is actually inspired by Made You Look by the absolutely wonderful Meghan Trainor, and I'm sure you know that song by now. And whilst I just get all of these things to melt down, this is a soap I've made that is inspired by her, but it's also one of these things that I'm using the leftovers of various pours I've done in order to make this. And I kind of had this in mind when I was doing it. So some of my other pours, the colours chosen for them were done specifically for this. And there are 3 layers. The first layer is a simple pink drop swirl. And if you want to know how to do a drop swirl, I will put a card just on the screen now, so you can actually see where that drop swirl technique is. And this is just a simple 2-colour drop swirl into the bottom of a slab mould, and that starts it off. And then once that has hardened up, we then move to a technique that I kind of call like stone or faux stone soap technique, which is basically where you use a black and white soap that you cut into tiny little squares and you chunk those down, and then you mix that with a grey soap and you create this kind of like stone looking effect. And that is my second layer, and then we're going to pour this third layer on top. And before we pour the third layer, what you'll notice I'll do is I'll actually score the top of the soap to create a key, and I'll also spray it with a little bit of distilled water, because soap likes water, and water will stick soap together. So we'll come to that in a little while, and you'll see how we get on with that one. So here we go. I'm just stirring this as it is melting these oils, and you do want to make sure that everything is melted when you are doing this technique, because without you melting it fully down and you start to kind of blend in those lumps, you may not hit them. Your ratios might be off. Just make sure that everything is melted down. Squish it against the side. This is still going to be quite hot for quite some time, so you can have plenty of heat in there to melt all of these down, but just take your time and make sure they are fully melted when you are doing this technique. Speed this up a little bit here and just get rid of most of these lumps. Now you'll see a little bit floating around, but there's still some residual heat. I know I'm going to leave this for a little while, so whilst we're just stirring all these bits in, I'm going to add my soft oils into it. The temperature is still going to be around about 35, 40 degrees, and that will be enough to melt these tiny little bits. But I'm not going to continue adding colours and bits and pieces like that until I've made sure this is fully incorporated. And I'm actually going to put it into a slightly bigger bowl just because I should have really done that in the first place, and this jug is a little too small. So let's get this all pulled into a bigger jug and get the stick blender in. So in this bowl, I've now added my soft oils. And as you can see, just on the surface there's a little bit of kind of texturing, which is probably due to the fact that the palm oil has just started to solidify a little bit and will give me a slightly false trace. Now, if this happens to you, don't panic, and also don't try and stick blend your batter smooth. And there's two reasons for that. Panicking is not good for anyone. It puts your blood pressure up. We don't want that. Second thing is if you try and stick blend a false trace out, you will actually thicken your batter up in the process of stick blending it. And if you are trying to do a nice swirl, you're going to end up with a batter that's not going to do it, and you've wasted all of that time, effort and money. So here what we've got is I'm just kind of stirring this with the stick blender. I'm burping the stick blender, giving it a good old, and you'll notice I'm just doing like a couple of seconds of burst, then giving it a stir. Still see the surface of that soap is slightly grainy, and you can see that it's still not really emulsified, but it's looking and starting to get a bit thick, and I'm kind of like, I think we might have a false trace here. So and give it a nice kind of whir. And this one was a little bit longer because I want to try and get everything getting to emulsion, but I don't want to send it over that emulsion. So one or two little more blasts here. And then what I'm going to do is, because you can obviously see that this is getting thicker, but I've still got that grainy texture to it. I know I've got a false trace here. Not going to panic about it. What I am going to do though, is after this little blast here, I think what we're going to do is start to hand stir this with a whisk. So I'm taking that out, and see how it's all gone nice and thick, but I've still got a texture to it that's just not working. And on the surface here, you can see it looks like I've got a trace. It looks like I'm fine, but I know I'm not, because if you take a very careful look at the surface area, there was a slight sheen to it. So get the whisk in and just hand stir it. Hand whisk it for maybe a minute, maybe a couple of minutes. You can see here it's probably less than 30 seconds, but it starts to thin down a little bit as that kind of solid oil is melting in through the temperature. I'm just making sure that it's working, the batter itself, and it will slowly smooth out. It will become less thick. It will actually then become a proper emulsion, and we will get rid of that false trace. So if you ever get that kind of graininess in a soap and you're using particularly palm oil, then you may get a false trace, and you just want to come back in and look how that has smoothed out and become nice and glossy on the top. And I've lost all of that kind of texturing on the top. So I definitely had a false trace, and I've definitely should have done what I'm doing exactly here and using the whisk. And there we go. That false trace has gone in a matter of what, 5, 10, maybe 30 seconds, but really it's absolutely perfect now, and it's gone back to being nice and thin. So the big rule here is, if you've got a false trace, stop stick blending, get a whisk in there and just whisk it. So I'm now going to get my colours done, and you'll see here I've got a nice bright kind of blue and this wonderful red colour, but we do get a colour morph in here, so spot the colour morph a little bit later on, or you may even have spotted it on the original post there. So we've mixed these with a little bit of oil so we can stir them through quite easily. I'm making these two the same size and around about 2/5 of the batter in each one of those. And in this one, I'm putting around about 1/5 of the batter in. This is going to be the dark colour. And what you want to try and achieve is for your lighter colours to be in the majority and your darker colour in the minority. And that darker colour will give you a nice contrast between your colours and will help this spin swirl considerably. And you may spot there just on the left hand side of the screen, I use my micas come from Resonate. It's a UK company. They do mostly kind of resin pours and stuff like that, but their micas are skin safe. They're all tested and they are absolutely perfectly fine. Now I've got Electric Blue, Fiery Fusion, and I've also got some Passion Purple, if you're interested in the colours I'm using in this one. So I've just split out that batter. So it was around about 500 mils in each of these blue and red. And it was round about, I think it was about 200 mils in the smaller container there. Now, as a lot of you might be online, you might see these forums, bits and pieces, and I do keep an eye on them. And I saw a question that was really interesting, and I was like, okay. And the answers are coming in. I was thinking, actually, no, that's wrong. And it's about, can you pour soap, fresh batter, onto a already saponified soap? Now, this is my soap that I'm going to be using for the rest of this. And as you can see, this is an already saponified piece of soap. I'm taking a knife here and I'm just scoring along the surface of this soap with a knife just to give it what we call a key. And that key is going to give us the ability to fuse an already saponified soap with unsaponified batter. I'm also going to take some distilled water here and I'm going to spray it onto the top. Now, if you think about the way that soap works, water is the glue that sticks it together. If you think about soap that's been sat on a basin and it's dried with the water underneath it, it sticks and it is quite firm. So that's what I'm going to do here. And if you use that technique, you can stick new batter to old saponified soap and it works. So I've just brought in here a turntable. As you can see, it's a free flowing turntable pretty much. This is a cake decorating one. You want to avoid the very thin, slim black ones that don't really turn. Now for the spin swirl, what you want to do is pour essentially kind of like bullseye patterns of soap onto various places in the mould. Now I'm doing this in the corners initially, and I'm just pouring in my soap in these kind of concentric circles of batter and just making sure that each time I'm pouring it in a manner that is not identical all the way. You want some interest going through your soap. You want this to kind of swirl really nicely. And you just want this to kind of be a random pattern. So by pouring kind of two corners first and then going in with another colour and then pouring in different, you can create a random pattern quite easily by doing this kind of technique. So what we'll do is we'll get this sped up a little bit so you can see exactly how this soap is going in and what I'm doing to create this kind of base that we then use for the spin swirl. So let's speed this up a little bit here, and I'm just going to talk very briefly about the turntable that this is on. This is a cake making turntable available on Amazon, and if I can find it, I'll leave a link in the description box below. But it's really important that you try and make sure that your turntable spins as freely as possible. Now, there are some cheap versions online which are like a very flat, basic and kind of pancake shape, and it's only maybe like a centimetre deep with two plastic plates that spin on top of one another. And that's really designed for moving like a heavy object a little way. You want something that's going to spin freely. Now, you could splash out, if you're going to do this a number of times, on a pottery wheel, which has a very, very good free motion. But this is just the kind of cheaper cake making version that you can get. It's not designed to kind of spin particularly fast, but you don't really want it spinning too fast. And I'll show you why you don't want it spinning too fast. And also, can you spot the deliberate mistake here? This mould is way too full for the spin swirl. However, we're still going to give it a go, and it's going to make a mess, and I'm going to clear it up, and it's going to be wonderful like that. But if you're going to do this technique, you want a deeper mould, or you don't want to fill it up to the top, because you'll see exactly what's going to happen when I spin it in a minute. But this is the spin swirl, so let's make a mess. So as you can see here, I'm just kind of spinning it around, and you can see how that batter is just kind of moving freely within it. Now you can go in one direction. There we go. I'm starting to clean it up. You can go in one single direction, or you can alternate the directions that you're going in. But you can see that it's not necessarily the spin that is creating the swirl. It is the stopping of the swirl to create that spin swirl. And you can see how it just really works. And if you had all the same colours in each of the corners, I don't think it looks quite as nice as having these kind of free-flowing different colours in all of these spaces. So I'm going to do as much of a spin swirl as I can in this. And because I'm kind of like quite happy, but I just want to create a little bit more interest in this, what I'm actually going to do is use a little bit of a skewer, bamboo skewer, or a metal skewer, just to go through it and give it a little bit more interest on top, because these will be actually the top of the bars. And this also creates a really interesting cross section as well. So you can see here I'm making a stunning mess. After I had stopped filming, I did go in and cleaned up as much of this as I could from off of the mould, and also from in between the mould itself. But actually this fits quite tightly, and I didn't have too much to clear up, and it did come out of the mould very easily with just a little bit of scraping, so it was absolutely fine. So here you can see I'm just kind of going through with the end of a paintbrush, making these kind of random marks, getting some interest in there and trying not to overwork it, a little bit more of a spin, and that is the spin swirl. So here we are the next day, and you can see how I've had a really interesting colour morph. That red that was ready red, and I put a little bit of blue in it to try and make that kind of shine through, has dulled out, and we've got some soda ash, and that's very unusual because it was very tight, but I didn't spray it with some rubbing alcohol. So I'm going to have to steam the top of this one to kind of take some of that soda ash away, and we're just going to bring back a little bit of the shine to our soap. So you can see the end there, how I've got these different layers going on. I've got this pink, this kind of grey, stony texture, and then this blue one. And I do apologise about that. That was a little bit of steam coming out from my steamer. And it may go in and out of focus now a little bit, but you can see here how we're just kind of steaming this top here, and you'll get rid of most of that soda ash, and you'll get some of the colours come back a bit brighter and a bit bolder. And it's just a really nice way of creating a shiny top on a soap. So what I thought I'd do is I'd just show you very quickly how to set up a slab cutter. This is this one here, and this is from Amazon. You can see it's got a scale on the side here for kind of measuring things out with. Your wire goes through this slot here, comes out the other slot on the other side, goes through the little eye hole here, down to your, what looks like a guitar tuner peg, and that's the basis of it. So if you've bought one of these and you were anything like me, you were like, okay, it's all set up, I'm not going to worry about it, get it set. And I'd noticed that I could only cut to round numbers, so 4, 5, 6, 7 centimeters tall. I couldn't cut a half, and I was like, okay, that's really strange. Now, these themselves will fit in to either side of this cutter, here and here. So they slide in here, and that's what kind of holds, your wire goes through, and that's what holds them up. But if you notice, and I hold them this way, you'll see that they match perfectly. They are a complete match for themselves here. But if I turn this one over, you'll notice that they then start to step in a different fashion. And silly me, they are designed to be flipped both ways. One way we'll do whole numbers. So this way here, we'll do a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 centimeter height. And then if you flip them around this way, the long edge here and the short edge here. So let's put the short edge facing along. You'll then get all of your half numbers. And it took me taking this whole thing apart to realize that, because it comes through from Amazon with no instructions. So if you buy one of these from Amazon and you get these bits with it, what you can do is just flip them around, unlike me, who went, well, that doesn't work, and I couldn't see another solution around it. So instead, what I did was cut my own 0.5 centimeter steps here. So those are 1/2 centimetre steps. And then I realised that I could do 1 centimetre steps the other way around, looked at these ones and went, oh, that's the way they work. So what we'll do with these is we'll set this up now because I want it at 7.5 centimetres, which, funny enough, is that way there. So I'm going to rest the wire on the top and bring that down to hook onto the little screw that's just under my left hand at the moment. So we put one of our steps on one side, one on the other side. We put the little kind of round bit on the screw that's there. You can see it just under my fingers. So we're going to hook that on. It goes up, across, okay, through to the 2 little gaps, through the eye, and then we feed the end of it into our guitar looking thing. And the thing with this is you just need to put it through and start turning it. And whichever way you turn it is going to be your direction that you want to keep turning it in order to keep the tension. Okay. But it will eventually bite and then you just keep turning it. Now, if you own one of these and you buy one, I would recommend that you always loosen the tension on your wire, because over time that tension will actually cause the wire to become more and more brittle. So if you then go to kind of tension it again, it will snap. But you just keep turning and turning and turning. And you'll see there's a little kink in the top there. But as I keep turning, you can see that kink is just slowly being pulled out. You give it a little flick and you'll hear a tone. And you just want to really get it to a tension that you're happy with. Okay. And the whole point of this is that you want these around this way. So you're pushing away from the step because you're actually going to push it against the edge of the gap in the white structure and not against the acrylic steps. Okay. So you don't want it really pushing against the steps. You want it pushing against the hole. All right. So we'll get this tension so I'm happy with it. And then what we'll do is get it set up on the table. And I'll show you how to do that in a second. So here we are with the soap cutter. And you'll see on the bottom here, just under this tab, we've got this block. Now that block is designed to sit on over the edge of the table. And the table is going to sit there. And you're going to push in this direction here in order to push your block through, and that's going to stop you. Now, the other thing about these is you'll notice that the bottom of the little gap here only comes up to 2 centimetres, which technically means you can only do 2 centimetre deep slivers. However, if you go online and you go to a online plexiglass store or acrylic store, you can buy these very cheaply. And these come in various widths, and I make them so that they're long enough for a loaf of soap. And you can pop this then onto the base of your soap cutter and push that through. And essentially the width of it will create an additional kind of barrier. So as you push through, you'll take off either 1 centimetre or 1/2 centimetre or 2 centimetre, whatever it might be, but that will allow you thinner. So that would be 1.5 centimetres, pushing that through. But then I've also got some popsicle sticks here that I've created this kind of raft with, and that's 4mm. So you don't have to go and spend a lot of money on the plastic, but it's a bit nicer. But this here's 4mm. So as you push that through, you'll take off 4mm of the height there. So it would be 1.4mm that you're taking off, and so on and so forth. So that's a really handy way of getting thinner slivers out of a slab cutter like this without spending huge amounts of money on very expensive bits of kit from America, or doing very thick rims on rimmed soaps when you want something nice and thin. So little tip there should you need it. So here we've got our slab of soap, and I know that the rough dimensions of this make it 15 centimetres across from edge to edge. I'm going to cut it in half, but first of all I just want to tidy up these edges, and the easy way of doing that is just taking a bit of a hair, sorry, just taking a flat edge or something like that, a piece of acrylic, anything that's just flat, edge of a knife, and just running it across to take off the little kind of meniscus bit that you inevitably get when you're using a slab mould. So we'll get those off, and then what we'll do is we'll get this prepped ready to go through our slab cutter. So what I've got here is a piece of greaseproof paper that I'm just going to fold in half, and that's going to roughly fit into my soap cutter here. Apologies for the angle on this one, but it's the best angle I've got for kind of shooting this sort of shot. So you can see that's going to fit in there, and I'm going to use that to slide the soap through so that I'm not actually kind of rubbing it across that surface, and it's just going to mean I get a smooth cut and I can keep the pressure up on it. So I'm going to grab my slab from here, and I'm going to just slide that through so the whole slab is on the piece of paper, and then I'm going to push slowly but firmly through the wire, which is going to move ever so slightly to touch the back of the white, and you can just see it here on the edge. I'm going to push that through very slowly, trying not to stop, but also not letting it kind of pop up. And then just at the end here, where my thumb is actually in line with the wire, and I'm pushing it through very slowly and keeping my finger on that wire so it doesn't kind of spring out. So just there, and that saves the back of the soap being blown out and breaking off, and just gives you a really nice cut. Now you're going to twist to remove, and you can see what a beautiful inside and all of those loops and stuff through the long side. And we're going to get some really nice textures and movement in the cross sections of that loaf, which is brilliant. Look at this, look at that, that's gorgeous. Anyway, this slab is ever so slightly more than 15 centimeters. So what I need to do is reset my bit of paper underneath. Okay, and so the bottom one is going to be the right size. I'm going to reset, and I'm going to push this one through, and you'll see that I'm going to take quite a thin sliver off. And again, if you want to do thin slivers of soap, what you can do is keep it high and build up from the bottom with cardboard or anything like that, or these acrylic strips. So I'm pushing through, and again, I'm just pushing very gently at this last section, fingers lined up with the wire, and so we're not going to get a kind of kick out. Turn to remove, and we've got that soap slab there, and we can now cut these into our bars. And so we've got all the big gun toys out today, and this is the Soap Cutter Pro, and I believe it's from a chap on Etsy, and it's a well-made, affordable and cost-efficient way of cutting soaps into multi-bars. You can get them in any size. And what I'm doing here is I'm just testing the sound, and I tune all of my wires to the same sound, so they all sound the same when I pluck them, and any that might be slightly out, I tweak it, so that gives me the same tension on all of them. So I tension them through sound, and it worked for me. So that is absolutely brilliant. So we're going to bring our bar in here. Now you don't often see me cut multi-bars very often, but we're going to cut this one. We're going to get it lined up, get two little slivers off of the edge, and we'll get, I think it's eight bars out of this one, 8 bars out of the other. That's 16 bars. These are quite nice soap mold if you're just doing small events and you want to just kind of do little bits. So anyway, we're going to bring this down, just line it up and make sure everything is aligned. I do clean this, and I use rubbing alcohol on it, but I've been using this quite a lot recently, so it does need a good clean down. So anyway, let's push this through, and I'm pushing firmly but not too firmly so that it rushes through. And as I get towards the end of pushing it through, I slow down a bit, and rather than pushing through with a clunk, I push through with a gentleness, as gentle as possible, which I find gives me a far better cut. I don't get as much kick out in the base, and it just works for me. So you can see I'm just resting my fingers on the table itself and using my body to just push that through very, very gently. You know, I've got a little sneak peek there, and we'll go through what's happening on those end pieces. But here we go, is the bar. Look at that. That's a beautiful bar with the 3 layers. I'm in love with this one. I absolutely love it. And you'll notice that this is sticking together quite well. And the reason for that is because I used water and I scored it. But the edges, you'll notice, if I bring these back in, they've split here. Now that will happen if you don't score and use water, and the edges are likely not to have had that scoring or water on it. So that goes to prove that the scoring and the water works when you try and connect batter to a already saponified piece of soap. Look, there we go. And you can see how those kind of loops and stuff in that spin swirl, and it's strong. And I'm trying to break that apart, but it's not coming apart. So the spin swirl is giving us all these kind of beautiful kind of swirls and tendriliness on the inside. Look at that. That's absolutely stunning. And it's given us this beautiful top as well. So we don't have to kind of go in and do anything particular on the top. And what I like about this way of doing it is because you're doing it on the top in the swirls like this, and it's designed to look like this, you're then not going back in and swirling the top with that kind of, with a bamboo skew or anything like that. And what it's doing is not disturbing that very, very top layer. So you get the pattern from top to bottom. There's no disturbance of that top layer. I love this soap. I think the color combinations are awesome. And you can see all the little bits of squares that I've cut in there. And how did I get them that small? Patience, the slab cutter, lots of bits of acrylic, and a couple of hours. So, but you don't have to have them that small. You can grate it. You could use confetti like that in the middle section, but I like those squares for the dynamic of it. I like the split. So it was kind of all worked out. And as I say, this is inspired by the Meghan Trainor song, Major Look. I know pink is one of her big colours, but I wanted to do something that had that kind of like amazingness to it. The other interesting thing, just quickly while I cut this other loaf for you, the only fragrance I've got is within the grey layer, and only the grey soap that's holding everything together. And it is 2% within that layer. So none of the other soap is scented, and it actually works out under kind of like 0.5% soap fragrance, but it's within tolerance within that layer. So it's quite concentrated in that layer, but still within the tolerance that the UK allows you. So you don't have to fragrance all the soap. I've used quite a strong green tea fragrance in this one because I really like that smell and it works very nicely. And it's one of those things is that you really just need to think about what you're doing as far as that layer is concerned and work within the tolerances for that layer. Yes, it will be a light fragrance. Yes, it's not going to come through that heavily, but because my other layers were unfragranced and I wanted to do this triple layer over time, just using stuff that was unfragranced in other videos I've done, this was the best way of doing it. It was just to fragrance that one layer in the middle there. So we've cut through that one. Let's have a quick look on the inside of this one. And there you go. So you've got all that beautiful drop swirling in the top there. That looks fantastic. And you've got that slightly different pattern in the top layer with a really kind of harsh middle layer. Absolutely loving it. See this one, again, breaks at that layer, but the other ones won't because they're stuck together. And this one was a bit, no, that one wasn't strong at all. But yeah, I love this soap. And I'll show you in all its glory once it's kind of firmed up a little bit. So if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. It really helps me grow and allows me to make more videos and tutorials for all of you. When you subscribe, don't forget to click the bell icon if you'd like to get notified when a new video is uploaded. And thanks a lot, Soapsters. I'll see you again next time.